Anthony Darby, and I'm here with Mike Brenner. Mike,
Hello.
thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's really cool and very much for me, full circle of Salisbury, as you and your brother were one of the first so-called locals of Salisbury that I met as I come here a long time ago, and much on different trajectories in terms of where we were at in our life space. And now we both have kind of been through different traditional industries and now find ourselves taking what we've learned in places like financial services and, in your instance, healthcare and technology crossroads, and then kind of bringing that into the cannabis space, right?
Yeah.
So for those folks that are unfamiliar, give me a little insight about kind of who you are, what you're about, and why you're here.
Sure. Yeah, I love the full circle approach. I'm sitting here in Salisbury, my hometown, talking about cannabis with a friend here, and so this is
And also one of our first patients, if that's allowed to be
day one patient. Very enthusiastic about legal cannabis across the country and in my home state of Maryland. Was so excited about it. I drove from Baltimore, where I was living at the time, to make sure I was here for day one, and was a first patient at a few dispensaries in Maryland. But backing up, lived in Salisbury, grew up here, went to high school here, and moved out to Washington, D.C. for college, studied computer science. After college, came to Baltimore, started a web agency there, building web products and technology products for brands, for businesses, and was very interested and taken by sort of this entrepreneurship direction that I was kind of very passionate about, and saying, how can I kind of continue doing my own thing, using technology as a tool for enabling that. Fast forward that I transitioned from doing web work to actually thinking about building some infrastructure for the technology community in Baltimore and in the region in Maryland. Built some products, launched a technology incubator, co-working space, software school kind of in one, called Betamore, that's still around, in 2012. And stepped down from my role there as CEO in 2015 to take a job out in Portland, Oregon, working for a health technology company. And that, I'll say, I'll just mention about cannabis. I've been, a fan, enthusiast, and user of cannabis since I can remember. Just before college was my first experience. And for me, it unlocked, I'd heard stigma about cannabis. You hear it there in school, you hear this from things like that. But then I experienced it firsthand, and said, wow, this for me, it enhances aspects of my life that are very interesting to me, my creative side, my art, my music, and being an entrepreneur, thinking about things differently, looking outside the box. So I really looked at cannabis as a tool rather than an escape or some other thing. So was very interested in it, but for me at that time, cannabis was very binary. It was a bag you got from a dealer. You didn't know what was inside the bag. I didn't even care. And back to the story here, out to Portland, Oregon in 2015, and that's when adult use had just gone online out there. So medical had already been around for a few years. Adult use goes online. I take a job for a healthcare company out there, but at the same time, I'm exposed to this industry, these dispensaries, these variety of products, and was just blown away. I mean, it's like lifting up this curtain, and all of a sudden you go from a mason jar of moonshine to a variety of craft products and form factors and stuff, and it's just...
I had the same exact experience. I remember my first time going into a dispensary in Denver, and this liberating feeling of being able to pull out my ID, knowing that I was going to do a very legal transaction for the first time, and I think both of us maybe have... Not so much in reality, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I've sometimes felt like an outlier with knowing how much of a tool cannabis could be and how it could help me. But in the circles that I ran in with the top performers, they didn't necessarily share the same insights to cannabis that I did. So I never really felt like I could be as open about it. And it was always illegal. It was never anything that I could share with my more conservative friends and family members in my network, my law enforcement friends. I always felt like there was a stigma if I were to be honest with them. But yet here I am in Denver being honest and doing a legal transaction. And I know that I'm not doing anything wrong in Maryland, but somehow now in Denver, like, it's legal, and just making that purchase and knowing that it was that moment, and then also I had happened to be working for a company that did franchise. It was called Fran Connect, and they basically worked with franchisors to deploy software within their franchisees to be able to manage all of their royalties and things like that. 7-Elevens, Dunkin' Donuts, like the big guys, and it was in the I forget what it's called in New York City. It's one of the big conference centers there, and they had like 3 out of the 5 partitions were for this franchise conference, which is like the World Franchise Show. It was like huge, and then one of the partitions was the International Cannabis Business Summit, and I was like. And I showed the guy my franchise pass, and he kind of, like, the security guard kind of gave me and let me walk over there, and there was all these legitimate packaging companies, and I was like, these are legitimate B2B companies, these are legitimate industries, like, cannabis is a real thing. This is probably 2015, 16, so like no program in Maryland, no anything. So I too got a little bit of flavor of what the reality of the cannabis industry was pre-Maryland as well. So back to you being out west and seeing a legitimized industry, it's attractive, right?
It's like jumping into a time machine, except instead of going backwards, you're going forwards here a little bit, and you see, oh, this is what this landscape, this is what this world looks like when this product or this industry exists. And just, I was just enveloped in this thing in Portland because not only were products and dispensaries and retail and supply available and illegal, but the community of people, the people around you, even if they didn't consume, the stigma just didn't exist there for it. A lot of people looked at cannabis as an alternative to alcohol. I wasn't coming out and saying, hey, I consume cannabis or I prefer cannabis over alcohol, to my professional network there. But also Portland, the mountains, the scenery, the hiking, all the things that my wife and I enjoy, it really did sort of enhance some of those experiences, which was great. But that said, being out in Portland and going into the dispensary and having this variety of products available, different strains, different form factors, different dosages, and having these very educated bud tenders telling you about all these different aspects and traits, I realized that there's a lot of information from a consumer standpoint to have to understand about the products, the chemical profiles and all these things to somehow have what everybody wants, which is a predictable experience, right? You want to have, because I remember trying an edible that a friend made in college and it was too much, and I was okay, but I remember another friend of mine.
Joe Rogan always says, "You're never gonna die."
You're never gonna die. Yeah, you may feel like your heart's.
But that doesn't mean that it's not a horrible experience, honestly, and
Right.
it doesn't mean that there's not a lot of reasons why we would want to prevent that experience from happening. And
Right.
to your point, like one of the things that we try to be really focused on here is giving them and what they expect.
Yeah, and so that sort of planted the seed in my head being out there. I didn't know where this would go, but this idea of there is a problem that exists. There's this sort of chasm here between me walking into the dispensary, looking for an experience that's going to enhance my creativity, my sleep, my outdoor enjoyment, my relationships. I may want a precise sort of product to fit that puzzle piece that I'm looking for, but then sort of feeling let down in the products that I was buying, not knowing is that, and then actually after consuming saying that really didn't do what I was looking for. Also just realizing I can have, two types of flower, consume one and have, one sedative experience and then another one is an energetic experience. And you hear about that being a pretty common type of spectrum that people have, either kind of a upper energetic or a more relaxing sedative. Those are the most common types of experiences you can have. So I wanted to learn more about what produces those effects. And so this was 2015, 2016. My wife and I moved back to the area. I jumped back into technology consulting here, worked for a bunch of non-cannabis companies, Fortune 500 companies, building technology products for them here. And that seed was still in my head. And at this point, Maryland had just gone online. You guys just opened your dispensary. I saw these products again, these form factors again. It felt so great to be in my home state and have legal access to the products here. But that problem still persisted and it just kept nagging at me. So I just jumped super deep into cannabis science and wanting to learn as much as I can about sort of the chemistry and how that plays a role into the effects. And that led me on a mission to then launch my company, which I launched last year, called Trackwell, and we can talk more about that as well. But just that essence, that idea, that problem of wanting to have predictable experiences and not.
So let's
knowing
dive into
when
that
to-
real quick, just for a second, because I think for me that is the legitimacy of a medical cannabis program, right? In my mind, that's the biggest difference of what I do versus what they do on the street. Is that the products that we have should be deployed in a way that we can provide this experience that they can expect, but then also we're using the knowledge that we have to be able to guide folks. So one of my biggest challenges was I've typically used cannabis for anxiety and depression, both CBD and THC. And before, when I would get cannabis off the street, it was always this, okay, great, I've achieved my goal of getting marijuana or getting cannabis, but now what is it, right? And there's the big test of how does this make me feel? And then oftentimes it was like, okay, now I need to really adapt my day because this it's because the medicine that I'm getting is only allowing me to achieve certain things. For instance, if I know you like to stay away from the indica and sativa, and if we're not talking about the height of the plant or if it's bushy or not, okay, I'll go with that with you, because I believe that we are on full agreement that that terpenes and that the other chemical compounds of the plant are a much better prediction of how that's going to make you feel than whether you call it a sativa or an indica, right? So when I would go and get this bag from wherever, it would basically say, okay, well, this is pretty sedating, which means I'm not going to be able to utilize this in the morning like I typically like to do, because it might make me sluggish all day. So then now I'm only using it in the evening time, which means I was probably a little more anxious and probably had to battle my depression a little more during the day than I would have liked to. It was just this constant like ebb and flow, or the opposite of this makes you really racy, so it means definitely can't use this at the end of a long day. And then we get to the point where we open our dispensary and I'm saying my morning and nighttime, very busy day, slow day, I'm able to utilize the tools, as we talk about, that best suit what I'm trying to achieve or the outcome that I'm trying to get to. And for me, what I found after 3 years of really having access to every cannabinoid-based product you could imagine in Maryland, is that a very solid regimen of CBD every morning. I take 60 milligrams under the tongue. That never changes for me. Like, and I find that is the cornerstone of my medicating. And then depending upon my day, depending upon am I going to be sitting where I need to be in front of cameras and I'm going to have a conversation, I need something that's going to make me more uplifting and give me some more energy, or do I need something that's going to be kind of in the middle, because I'm stuck in my office and my mind can't be raced. I'm going to really sit down and focus and really be able to get through my day. Yeah. Just being able to understand of what's going to happen if this has got a lot of pining in it, or what's going to happen if this has just got limonene. What's a 2-to-1 limonene myrcene ratio do to me versus a 1-to-1 limonene myrcene ratio, and just diving into these things that, I believe your product is a solution to what I think there's a faster way to get to what I've achieved, right?
I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, everything you've said is the exact sort of natural path we should take as people that are, curious about how I can use tools to aid whatever it is I'm doing. I mean, if you know you're going to go running today or something after work, maybe you'll throw your running shoes in. You want that tool to be available to you when you go running, right? So you're thinking ahead, you're thinking about your day, you're thinking about the experience that you want and what's going to enable that and support that. So, on a very primitive level, talking about the shoes here, but on cannabis, because this plant produces such a variety of different effects and experiences for people, once they really dial in and learn how to use that tool, it can become overwhelming, right? So the first thing that a great bud tender typically says to a patient who's trying cannabis for the first time is, try a journal, take a paperback journal, and I recommend that too. Take a paperback journal, write down the product you just had, and the experiences that you felt. And just from an understanding there, you can kind of look at that and say, okay, this product produced these experiences, right? You can go a lot more into detail about that about that journey. and that
Journaling is the
experience.
number one recommendation that we give every single patient that is starting a new CBD
Great.
or THC regimen. Matter of fact, it's even on the back of every CBD one pager that we give our new patients, because if you're listening to this and you're struggling to find that dosing sweet spot, it's going to take a little while.
Right.
And if you're not journaling and you're not documenting, it's going to make whoever is guiding you through that, no matter who it is, their life a lot more challenging. So it sounds somewhat primitive, but honestly, just writing down what time, how you felt, how you feel afterwards, the things that you have, I'm sure, have included.
And it's not unique to cannabis. This concept of titration is the medical term for this, of kind of working your way through at the least amount possible up to the next available, incrementally the next amount of dose that you need to get that minimum effective dose,
dosing.
right?
Yep.
How can you identify that minimum effective dose? And we do this with pharmaceuticals today, with psychological pharmaceuticals, right? There's not an aspirin for every medical, psychological condition that exists. So typically there's this trial and error process with your doctor. You're meeting on a regular basis, you're engaging, you're journaling, bringing that same concept to cannabis, right? We don't have the luxury of having patient to provider access. I mean, in this campus we do, but not in every dispensary and every experience does consumers have that. So we don't really push that as an option. And so we really put the chore on the user to keep track of this sort of thing. So
real quick, if I can just, because this is why I find this is so important, is because unlike traditional medicine, there's so much more onus on the user to be proactive and to really manage, because you're not getting a prescription that says come in and get this very specific product and take it 3 times a day and then walk out, right? You're getting that certification, and you're going to walk into a dispensary that's got hundreds of products, and it can be very overwhelming. So I think it's so important, like you talked about, to have that guidance and to have that.
Yeah. And so, in thinking about that problem that exists around this chore for the consumer, the predictability, the variety of plants that are out there, you mentioned indica sativa. I'm not going to die on that hill. I still think it's great value. And I think it's a good, it's a good dichotomy that consumers can use to kind of remember uplifting and relaxing. It's fine. I do think there are better ways to categorize and label cannabis products, but it works for now, and I'm not going to, fight against the tide of where it's going. But it's a lot of work. And so my thought was, how can technology support that work? How can technology sort of aid that consumer experience? And looking at the landscape of products that exist for consumers today, I realized there was nobody that was really hitting this opportunity. And so, I packaged up all of my thoughts, my science research, and let me disclaim, I am not a cannabis scientist. I've talked to a lot, I listen to a lot, I study a lot. But how can we take that knowledge from them? How can we take the knowledge from the cultivators, the people that are growing the plants for years, forget the scientists, the people that just know these plants, know the genetics and what they're going to produce from their own experiences? How can we take all of that information and make it as available for the consumer as possible in a way that doesn't require a lot of work from that consumer to have to know everything about cannabis? And so what we're building, Trackwell is the company. We're building a mobile app for consumers. We're building consumer software, really, but a mobile app that we've created that allows consumers to find, track, and discover their favorite cannabis products and brands. So very simple in an idea, make something that's kind of like a bud tender in their pocket, right? We don't want to get rid of the experience in the retail world, but how do we keep that journal, that information that's available to them, how do we put that in their pocket and make it just super easy for them to track their experiences with the products they purchased, and then use that information to inform their future purchase decisions and future purchase discovery. I'll mention real quick about some of the products that are out there. You've got some of these big players like Leafly, right? Leafly is the godfather of sort of cannabis software for consumers. And they went super deep into building the strain index of different strain profiles and saying, hey, this is Blue Dream, here's the lineage of this product. It tends to produce these effects, these experiences. And they did that by cataloging all these reviews and experiences for all Blue Dream products that are out there.
If you're bored, read Leafly reviews on strains.
Yes.
They're better than Yelp.
They're amazing. I mean, they're great just to have that history of, this strain Girl Scout cookies came from this sort of cross or whatever. It's cool. I wish I had that for everything, for fruit, it would be cool to see the different varieties of different products that are out there. But the problem with that is that it's not one size fits all. If I wanted to consume wine, for example, I wouldn't sort of categorize all Pinot Noir has these same sort of taste and characteristics associated with it, I would really have to talk about who was the producer of that wine, even more specifically, which vintage of that producer's Pinot Noir are we talking about?
Well, and that's I think that's a really good analogy, and it's somewhat challenging when patients they have some success with a product. I had this sticks in my head yesterday. We had a patient that was linked on a single strain, and she was frustrated because we didn't have that specific strain in. What I was trying to explain is that first off, this is something that grows, right? And it's not something that is made in a factory where it's the same exact thing every single time. And what I was trying to explain to her was, and what your app would have solved for her was taking that strain name off the table. It would have taken the chemical compound of that strain and categorized it in a way that she'd be able to take that chemical compound and find a very similar product to help her out, correct?
Yeah.
And what we see sometimes is that folks that focus, it's always, in my mind, it's always a losing battle to focus on a strain name. Because there's so much variances, even from cultivar to cultivar. I get Grape Stomper in a yellow Energized from GTI. I get Grape Stomper from Harvest in a purple Indica.
Yeah. So to that point, cannabis products, because they're natural products and because they're not synthesized and mass produced at a scale where it is a consistent product, they're fleeting. They may not exist forever. And so, I tell people, if they see a product that they like on the shelf, it produce an experience they like, go back to that dispensary, match that batch if they can, and get as much of that as they can. Because they may not see it again. The challenge with strain names are that they're used to identify the genetics of the plant, right? Hopefully. But when you look at it, I'll mention this one story. When I was in Portland, I remember hearing from a dispensary that a product had been created by a grower. He had crossed a couple different things, was trying to make his own product, make it hot and sexy, and it wasn't selling, did not sell. And they pulled that product off the shelf, and they relabeled that same exact product as gelato, which is a very, marketable brand, put it back on the shelf, and it flew off the shelf. It was great. I know that's not everywhere, and I know there are some safeguards to protect against that.
It's not. I think it's a fair fact to say that majority of the names are based around marketing. When I see Georgia Pie and I see all these, and I'm not calling cookies out or anything, but the different brands that are out there in our market, Poochie Love, these different things. There's not a medical context behind it.
Right.
It's there.
Cheetah piss.
It's there to be, and even green crack, the old school things like that. Like in a medicinal program, it's tough for me to say, okay, it seems like you're really looking for something for some energy midday. I think you should try green crack.
Yeah.
Like it would have been right. Like, and these are conversations. I literally remember having a Poochie Love conversation, which was the only. At that point, this was early in the program, but that was the most applicable product for a patient that was 19 years old with cerebral palsy, and her mother and father were caretakers there, and trying to have a conversation around Poochie Love, and you're trying to make it seem kind of fun, but at the same time, I would have much rather just had a very professional approach and been like, I would have rather called it XYZ 19432,
right, than
some of these names that come through.
Yeah,
but
with the strains though,
the batches are different. The batches
are
testing.
There's variation for sure. There's been some studies that have been done that say, okay, from a producer that's growing a known genetic there, known strain, a cultivar there, is there variation in the batches? And we've found that there are. Even in our own work, we've found that there's variation there. And so once you identify that variation, you have to then consider that variation in your whole aspect of how you identify these plants. And so back to genetics real quick, I just want to mention there's no governing registrar that keeps track of these genetics. There have been some attempts to do some of this stuff to protect patents and IP, but because of that, there's nobody genetically verifying the seeds that are actually dropped into the soil, even in Maryland. So we take the word of the growers that these seeds are what Grape Stomper or whatever, and sometimes, not prevalently, but sometimes some growers are actually, they're consuming the finished product and saying, well, that feels gassy, that feels like a sour diesel to me, so let's just let that sour diesel, right? And we've got these issues with interstate. How we even get the genetics into the state is a challenge too. So they're working with the constraints that they have at hand. But once me sort of recognizes that, wait a minute, that genetics isn't guaranteed to be pure landrace heirloom blue dream, I can't use that strain name as the only unique identifier of that product. I've got to look somewhere else, right? And that's why I've turned to the most, for me, what I consider to be the most accurate representation or unique identifier of that product. And to me, that's the chemical profile, which we're blessed here in Maryland to have access to one of the richest profiles and the requirements in the entire country.
One of the things that Maryland did bless us with was a very stringent set of C of A's that come with every product that we get. So we're seeing all the heavy metals testing. We're seeing all of the pesticide testing. We're going to see terpene profile, the cannabinoid profile. They're testing for minor cannabinoids. So we really are blessed that our labels are the way they are. And I've been to the testing labs and think that that as patients in Maryland, they do enjoy a luxury that is not found in other states like California and things like that, where the testing is just not as accurate and it's not as detailed.
And it's still within its own challenges to the COAs. They're based, the batches that are tested are based on 10 pounds or less of the same sort of similar product that was grown in that same area. Even within those 10 pounds that are grown, you know, different lighting conditions, things can.
We've been there. I mean, you walk into a 20,000 square foot facility. Even the rooms themselves are 3,000 or 4,000. There's no way that every single plant in that room looks exactly the same. Right. And the one that may have gotten the closer part to the nutrients versus the farther part of the nutrients, or the hotter lamp or the lower lamp or the HVAC, all these different things have vast effects on what that plant looks like at the very end of it.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, it's not 100%.
It's not 100%, but it's exponentially more accurate than the strain name, which is what we've used as our existing sort of way to identify these plants. And brands, I think, are getting savvy about, you mentioned some of these names are kind of rough around the edges, but attract a certain audience. Brands are getting savvy. Some of them are renaming their products with the intended effects. Like, this is the uplifting flower, right, from this company. Which is helpful, but studies also show that the same product can affect two people differently, right? So because of our unique biochemistry, our gender, setting, all these different factors can actually produce different effects. I can take a product, cut it in half, and you and I can have different experiences. So to then label...
Everyone's got an endocannabinoid system that's going to operate completely differently. And the one thing that I've been most mesmerized by is how the same product could affect two people completely differently, depending on what's going on in their brain, what's going on, and how their body's going to process things. Pining is one of the easiest ones to play with to figure out how it's going to affect two different people. You give it to one person, they're cleaning their house, they're whistling Dixie, everything's great. You give it to another person, they're plotting why their entire life has been a sham, and they need to figure out like what's going to happen, right? So, and like when we treat something like anxiousness, pining gets a lot of people through it and over it, and they're on to the next thing, and it's an enabler for them. And then there's other folks that it just enables their anxiety. It increases those thoughts. Their mind racing is a detriment to what they're trying to achieve. And it's important that what your app intends to do as the community grows and grows is it's going to be able to take those things into effect as well. It's not just here's chemical profile as they should work, but here's actually how they're working.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's with cannabis, there's this biphasic kind of approach to cannabis, this Goldilocks zone where too little of something may not have the intended effect, too much may not have the intended effect, and right in the middle is the sweet spot. So not only do you have to identify the chemistry that's working for the effect you're looking for, you have to identify the dose and the amount that's going to be working for you. So very complicated chore for this consumer to get to where they want in this predictable experience there. With our app.
With archaic products too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, some of these things that the challenges in my mind will be less significant in 5 years as we see the maturation of the products. Like, for instance, Curio's got a really great new sleep tablet out. It's take this, it's time released, it's very sophisticated in its method of action and how it works with the body, way more so than trying to just use a bag of plant-based material to achieve a health outcome, right?
Totally. Yeah,
especially dosing with a bong hit is much different than dosing with a tablet.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a big fan of ingestibles and edibles. I think the onset is obviously much longer before you actually can experience something. It's not as predictable there based on what you ate, and your stomach contents could actually affect that as well. Under the tongue tends to be sort of the most efficient fastest experience that you can have there without
Shout out to our sublingual tincture.
Sublingual, totally. I'm fascinated with all these different consumption methods, even for patients that need a high amount of the psychoactive THC, cannabinoid, which normally might make any of us sick because too much THC, you kind of get nauseous. For patients that need very high doses of that for cancer and for other things that they're treating, you've got the suppositories as well that can bypass the psychoactive effects you're getting, but still get the THC into the bloodstream, interacting with the endocannabinoid system and producing the effect that they're looking for. So a lot of innovation there in terms of consumption methods and how absorption's working. Our app, what we wanted to create was this magic moment for the consumer to take the app, scan the label of the legal product they've just got off the shelf or that they're looking at in the store, and in a couple seconds they've got everything about that product at their fingertips. So the verified lab tests, product reviews, notes from the brand, the producer, feedback from their friends if they are on this platform. And so we wanted to create this app that provides this rich, deep information about each product that exists on the shelf. Then, kind of moving forward, we wanted to use that information so that consumer can then stash that or add that, keep track of that and say, hey, I purchased this product today. This is the amount that I purchased. And they can keep track of those experiences and review that product in the app as well. And then finally, we wanted to, using that information and the engagement that person has with those products, socialize that to enhance this discovery. So how can we use those past experiences they've told us about it to inform their future decisions and what they're looking at? And realizing that social is actually a big part of that. So we wanted to socialize that so they could meet other cannabis enthusiasts that are maybe going through the same things as them, the same challenges, connect with brands. So we mentioned the consumer problem being predictability and keeping track of their experiences. Producers, growers, processors that make these products, they have a separate set of challenges, and their challenges are typically around marketing their products, targeting those products to consumers that want to see that information. So today, we often say that they're left with spray and pray marketing, where they send out a text message or send out an email to all of their subscribers instead of being very targeted and focused. Our app allows producers and brands to actually target messaging to consumers on sort of the opposite of how the consumers experience the app too. So building this social network, as I mentioned, there isn't a social network for cannabis enthusiasts today.
No, and it's all the more needed too, because what we see is, unfortunately, with the federal landscape that we live in, the amount of research and development in terms of how it's traditionally done in the pharmaceutical world are few and far between. And what I've found is the most extreme case of this is always the can of moms. So you showed me a mom with a child that's got something that they believe cannabis can cure for. And these support groups and these groups of moms with kids with epilepsy and kids with Dravet syndrome and the different things that they are a wealth of information. And I think that your app could be this meeting place for these folks to come in. And we see it in our dispensary every time. I mean, I have several employees with specific diseases and issues, and when one of our patients comes in and finds out that they have something in common, that they have similar symptoms it's like this immediate bonding moment, right? And you can see that our patients are so desperate, oftentimes feeling like they're on an island, that they're the only ones that may feel like this, and a lot of them come to our dispensary as their last ditch effort. This wasn't their first crack at this. I've been to 7 different doctors and no one can figure out how to make me feel better, and now I come in and, oh my gosh, this person across the counter from me went through the same 12 different pharmaceuticals that I went through and 4 different specialists and didn't get any help, and now cannabis has helped her so much that she works for us. Like, this like bonding moment and this almost sense of hope. And I think building that community in a very physical sense is what we were trying to do here, and building that community in a digital sense and in a virtual sense is what I think, what I would I think is a big value in your app, and I think will be really a strong place for folks to be able to go and get valuable firsthand data. And because everyone does have a different system, but when you find someone that is kind of like your can of doppelganger, it's just like, it's like aha moment, right?
Yeah, identifying these peers, these people you may not know are like you may not know them in real life, but very similar characteristics. You may experience cannabis in a similar way. You may have similar challenges as each other. And, we have these social networks for different types of groups. I use Strava, for example, to track my runs, my bike rides. They've positioned themselves as the social network for athletes. And I'm nowhere near, a hardcore, I don't run marathons, but I'm inspired by seeing other people and what they're doing, and building these social tools for athletes that are very specific, and not just relying on a Facebook group for athletes, but actually building a product where the tools and the experiences you have in that product, every single thing is based on it being an athlete. Or Fishbrain. I know you like to fish. I like to fish. Fishbrain is the social network for people that enjoy to fish. I mean, it's got some fishing hotspots on there, which some of the guys don't like to put out some of those secret spots. But every part about that app is geared towards fishing, and cannabis doesn't have that product.
Is the fishing app also a lot of people saying that the weight of the fish is not accurate?
Yeah,
I joined a Facebook group. It was like largemouth bass. Everything is the guy posted a picture of a big fish saying, "Look at my 7-pounder," and then every comment, "Can't be over 5. Looks like 4.5 to me. Maybe 6 at best." Like, get out of here.
Totally.
It's so funny.
The Fishbrain thing is cool because you can take a picture of a fish, and in a couple seconds it tells you what species it thinks it is. So it does some machine learning.
I haven't looked into that.
And it's real. I mean, just for that one purpose. So this is one of our philosophies as a company is, when we're building these tools and we want users to use them, it's kind of come for the tool, stay for the network. How can we create a tool that provides value day one, but then as a byproduct, they're discovering this network of other enthusiasts just like them that keeps them engaged in this platform.
Have you ever been to the Magic Butter fans page?
Yeah, I'm on it.
Like 50,000, maybe more, hundreds of thousands. I mean, and that group, to your point, or to the idea of building this community, I mean, you could ask anything about the Magic Butter machine and know that you'll get hundreds of responses. And like, when you can build that community, the value, to your point, is to come here for this tool and then all of a sudden see that all the cool kids are here using it and there's a lot of good information here, you'll want to stay and interact.
It enhances the moms you talked about. I mean, I've seen the documentaries, these moms, shout out to moms that cross state lines to find medicine for their kids, breaking laws.
Angels and
and then they go online in a safe space to be able to talk to other moms that have gone through what they've gone through, and they're on Facebook and they lose their account because they mentioned that they purchased a product at a dispensary somewhere, and you're not allowed to talk about cannabis purchases and marketing. You guys know this firsthand. On Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Reddit. These are the places where this conversation exists today. So we wanted to create a safe space for people to discuss this. In thinking about our app, we realize not everybody wants to engage with others. Some people are not as comfortable talking about cannabis as you and I are. So we have designed our app in a way, we call it single player mode. So if you don't want to engage with the world, you want your account to be private, that's okay too. You can still get the utility function of the app, track your experiences. Thinking about Leafly and Weed Maps and some of these other platforms that have cataloged products that are out there. If I open Leafly and I search for product, and then let's say my wife opens up Leafly on her phone and searches for, she's going to see the same exact results as me if we're in Maryland. And you look at something like Netflix or Amazon Prime, we each have our own login. I know when I'm logged into her Netflix account because it's not a single show I'm interested in. But they've done, this is a great
Hallmark
example.
Christmas again. Like, get out of here.
My mom is subscribed. We wanted to create a similar type of lens that filters the data you're looking at based on your preferences, based on that individual's preferences, not what everybody around you has said, but based on you. The best products out there do that, and it doesn't exist for cannabis. And to get there, how do we get to it knowing who you are? We think it starts with building this really rich catalog of information, products, of known information about these products, pairing that with user experiences and their reviews, and then using that to inform that future discovery and experience that the user has.
So if they're hearing this podcast, then the app is available for download, right?
Yeah, it's free. Anybody can use it. We don't ask for your medical card before you use the app, but the only catalog of products we interact with are legal licensed products. So no home grow products, no street products on our app. So you won't get value if that's the type of information you're looking for. But we think that's important because we wanted that rich information, the lab tests and things like that. So you'll get access to all of that information. You can begin stashing your products, tracking your experiences, and just seeing the products that are out there. I do want to mention, we are not, so all of the software that exists for consumers today, Leafly, Weed Maps, iHeart, Jane, Dutchie, they're all pretty much doing the same thing. They're going to dispensaries and they're saying what's in stock, and let's put that online for consumers so they can have an e-commerce experience where they can add to a shopping cart and check out. And it's great. We need that, especially with COVID. You can't go in and browse, so you have to do this online. The problem with that is that it's the lowest hanging opportunities. Everybody's kind of going for it right now. There's no incentive to have rich information about products. All they need is a product title, a price point, and an inventory count to sell that product, and they're off to the races. So for us, we've intentionally not cataloged what's in and around you in dispensaries. Instead, we go to the producers that make these products and say, tell us about all the products you make in Maryland right now and the batches of those products. And let's get the COAs as well. So for us, our incentive is to go as deep as possible about these products to tell those stories to consumers. Eventually, we'll get there. But for right now, this is kind of one of the pieces of feedback we get from our test users is, okay, great, you've recommended these products. Now where can I go find it around me? So we're showing you only products that are in Maryland, but we do recognize you have to then go, you can add it to your wish list in our app. You've got to go to your local dispensary and say, hey, do you have this product that I saw on Trackwell? It's got the profile I'm looking for. So we do recognize that pain point, but it's intentional that we're doing that. Awesome.
Anything else?
No, just a big fan of what you guys are doing. I want to just give a quick shout out.
Thanks,
I think it's easy for anybody to get a dispensary license and set up 4 walls and get inventory and sell product. Well, I shouldn't say easy. I take that back. I think people could have just gone, whoa, I made you drop the mic. I think people could have just gone the shortcut path and saying, we'll just kind of open up the business and sell products. But I think what you guys have done is make it your mission to make kind of wellness part of that whole experience. How can we really make this completely dialed in, full circle here, experience here for the users, not just on THC products, CBD products, the whole wellness ecosystem, I think is so smart to do and so needed. So I'm so excited that my hometown is this like beacon of wellness now in Maryland, through cannabis and through your work here. So hats off to you guys.
Well, thank you so much. You have paved the way for young professionals in Salisbury, and I did a lot of between you and Jake and some of the guys that are in the 30-somethings that grew up and eventually said, hey, Salisbury, we could be better than what we are. We have a thriving downtown that sits on a riverfront that we can make cool. We have these different things that we're not utilizing. And I remember being a young professional in 24 and 25 and seeing guys like you and seeing what you're doing at Beta more and feeling empowered by not feeling too young to be able to get things done. And I feel at Salisbury, it's just always been for me this perfect entrepreneur ecosystem where it's not a small market, it's not a big market. There's enough room for competition. There's a lot of things that make it a great place to start a business, and I appreciate what you said about our business. We really do have a mission here to improve the health of our community, and we look at ourselves as the same responsibility as the hospital does and other folks. We just do it a little differently than they do, and we're finally starting to get some of the recognition from traditional providers. Baltimore Business Journal recognized us as a leader in healthcare, which is crazy. Yes. I mean, to think 5 years ago that a cannabis company would be recognized as a leader in healthcare is pretty wild to us. Yeah. But they get it, and they get the model, and practitioners I think appreciate the fact that we're not just trying to throw weed at everybody and say, oh, what's going on? Yeah, come in here and buy some weed. It's all going to go away. That's not how this works. And seeing you and your progression and interest in cannabis and finally pulling the trigger and a few years ago and saying, okay, I'm going to solve this problem myself. And I think this is what I'm going to, this is what needs to be done. And patients and not just patients, but just people in general's lives will be better, and they'll be able to get their health outcomes and the outcomes that they're trying to achieve with this tool faster. And now here you are in light, and it's here. It's a deployable app that people can get, and I think it's awesome. And I'm about it. And I think that people like us that care about the end user and that care about the experiences that we create are going to benefit and win. And I think this is a testament to it. So shout out, man.
Shout out to you, man. I mean, you guys get all the credit for doing the hard work. I'm just excited to see this here in Maryland, and I'd love to mention.
Thank you for choosing us too. Honestly, like the fact that
Yeah.
day one you were there with the very first patients that ever got served on the eastern shore of Maryland for medical cannabis. You know, you're in the first handful, and it was only because we were trying to run 3 transactions at the same time. And now that my new dispensary and this new model is the place where you want to launch your app is like, you know, it's icing on the cake for me. So, for our patients, make sure you're picking up the Trackwell pre-roll wraps, or not pre-roll wraps, but rolling papers. Make sure, you know, you're downloading the application, and let's support, you know, a local for us and support someone that's doing great things. So thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Anthony. I appreciate it.